Welcome to another episode of Investing in Intellectual Property with David. Today we have a very special guest with us today. This gentleman is part of the most winningest football class in MSU sports history. He spent some time in the NFL as well as the CFL and currently is the Assistant Athletic Director at Michigan State University in charge of NIL. Please help me welcome Darien Harris. How's it going, Darien?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Again, thank you for being able to, chat with me a little bit today, just about your experiences and especially with regard to the NIL, name, image, and likeness. I think you're going to be able to provide some valuable input and just a perspective to the audience on NIL as, we hear and see that word acronym thrown out a lot more these days. I guess in terms of, and we also get off a little later into like your playing days and kind of how you came up and, just spending some time playing football professionally and things like that. But starting out with like NIL, can you maybe explain what I guess that means? We all know name, image, and likeness, but can you explain a little bit more in terms of what NIL is?
Yeah, absolutely. So NIL, which has continued to evolve since the legislation kind of took action in 2021, is essentially what allows student athletes now to profit off of their name, image, and likeness, to profit monetarily or also with product or with different opportunities. Also allows student athletes to create their own business if they would like to, become entrepreneurs, anything around the spaces that college athletes weren't allowed to do when you were playing here at Michigan State, as well as myself. So, from the grassroots level, the baseline level, when you talk about name, image, and likeness, you're talking about, of course, your name showing up anywhere in reference to or in relation to representing another business or an entity. Your image is, of course, your photo or anything like that showing up in the same vein, and then your likeness is any caricature or depiction of you. So like a video game, a animation, or anything that somebody could look at and say, okay, that's this person. That's what stands to your likeness. And if any of those things show up in ways that another business is profiting off of utilizing your NIL, you also now have the right to profit off of that too. And so it's been definitely been a roller coaster, and it's always likened to the Wild Wild West. But I always say it's really been educational for us, and more importantly for student athletes, to really learn about how they can be active in this space.
Nice. No, I love that description there. I did a presentation last year at the law firm, just kind of talking about this whole NIL ordeal. And I guess at that time, and I'm not sure if Texas Tech actually implemented this or if they're still doing it, but I had kind of found an article that talked about Texas Tech program, and they had their, I guess, a NIL fund, if you will, where they were actually paying the students every year. I think it was like $25,000. I'm not sure if they have tweaked that or made some changes to it since the article that I read a year or so ago. But I kind of, as I was doing some research in preparation for this interview, I came across the Evergreen program at MSU, which was voted at the NIL Summit in Atlanta, the best institutional program back in 2020 or this year in 2023. So can you maybe talk a little bit about the importance of a university having a robust NIL program, especially as it relates to trying to attract recruits and student athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think all of those are exactly what everybody's navigating right now. Starting with what we have as an athletic department, which most athletic departments have. Pretty much nowadays, every athletic department has some sort of NIL program. So ours here at Michigan State is called the Evergreen program. Our four pillars are educate, empower, educate, innovate, and brand our student athletes. Brand, empower, educate, and innovate. And it's really our program where we're able to provide and facilitate education for student athletes, provide and facilitate tentpole events and programming around NIL for student athletes, house our on-campus and community marketplace, local marketplace called the MSU Exchange, where businesses can register and directly contact student athletes. We have that housed under influencer. And also make sure that we're educating businesses and other folks that want to get involved in NIL how to do that correctly. where there becomes a little bit of a not necessarily a disconnect, but just trying to make sure that there's a separation between the two. Is you also have the collective space. Collectives operate for the most part outside of an athletic department. They essentially are collection of folks, or just a collection of dollars that get allocated to student athletes for different reasons, whether it's marketing, appearances, promotions, anything like that. A collective is, by definition, a collection or a pool of money for a specific cause. You can now do that in the NIL space. So when you may see like, hey, Texas Tech is paying, athletes $25,000, that's not coming from the athletic department.
Right,
That's
right.
coming from the collective,
Yep.
which somebody outside the athletic department decided to create. And it was actually, I was reading a really good article on it yesterday that you do have to make sure that you are educating folks on the difference.
Yep.
And we've even run into that ourselves. We just started our NIL X or Twitter platform. And when you do something like that, but then the collective also already has a page as well, people get confused. So people are like, well, which one do I support? It's like, it's not a either one. This one is from the athletic department. This one is just like if Nike or Adidas or Under Armour or any other entity signs athletes, that's what a collective is able to do. So, that's why people kind of look at it as the Wild Wild West, because there's so many other entities and things that pop up that really kind of make it cloudy. So it's really important to educate folks on the best ways to support and actively engage in NIL to make sure they don't get confused.
No, got it. So then I guess as it relates to MSU NIL program, do they have something kind of similar to that? Not whether it's from a collective or internally, or just from a group where each player on that team is getting some form of compensation as part of an NIL deal, or is it kind of just based on a particular player, whether it's a star player or a starter, or whatever the case may be? How does the Evergreen program at MSU kind of deal with, I guess, compensating players? Is it just the whole team get some form of compensation, or is it direct, specific players based on, I guess, the rules of the collective or the other group, whoever is kind of providing the funding to the I guess collective or I guess the fund, if you will?
For sure, yeah, it's all of the above. So, starting with the Evergreen program, and as members of the athletic department, we don't decide, control, have anything to do with who gets paid what, whether it's a team-wide deal, not a team-wide deal. That we have nothing to do with that. We don't want to touch that, because now we're getting involved in the transaction, and that's when everything has to stop for us. So when the money starts to be talked about, it's when we have to exit the room. So there are a couple of collectives that do work with our student athletes, which is great, because it gives all of our, pretty much all of our student athletes, especially those from the Olympic sports, non-revenue sports, an opportunity to participate in NIL. As you mentioned, you're always going to have, some star players at the top that do have opportunities. But again, it's a little bit of a misnomer to think that every star player at every school is getting a robust amount of opportunity. There's probably only 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 total student athletes in the whole country that are getting like monumental deals because of their star power. And it's actually increased. So I'd say, if you would think about like Nike signing an athlete, or Adidas or New Balance, like those are starting to pop up a little more frequently. But again, that's on them. It's not we don't go seek out, hey, you need to work with X player and pay them this amount, because then now we're operating as an agent, and that's not our job.
Right.
So our job is just to make sure that student athletes have the education to know that they can enter into a deal if they want to, or they can decide not to. So we do have some teams that have full team-wide deals. Women's basketball, for example, is a full team-wide deal with MSU FCU, which also happens to be a corporate partner of MSU Athletics. But when it comes to the actual deal, like, we didn't create that. They came to that team, MSU FCU did, and said, hey, we want to sponsor and work with and have this team endorse us. Great. So then it's up to those young ladies if they would like to enter into that deal, or if they don't want to enter in that deal. It's totally up to them. But it's not really up to us to say what you can do or can't do, or for us to go to MSU FCU and say, hey, all right, if you want to work with our athletes, you have to pay them X amount. Now, could we eventually get there in college athletics? Probably, but that's just not the case right now.
No, and that's interesting, because I guess from the outside looking in, I initially thought that okay, as part of the NIL department or whatnot at that university or at that school, you guys were maybe bargaining deals, but no, we're just educating. Are you
Yeah,
guys also, just purely educational, or is it maybe providing different, we're trying to maximize the opportunity by saying, hey, go to this person or that person, or getting a
absolutely.
call from?
Yeah, so we're definitely doing that, and what I always say is I don't want a student athlete to miss out on an opportunity. So, for example, next week, a week from today, actually, we're having what's called 517 outreach event, where we're actually went around, did some grassroots marketing, and invited all local businesses to come on campus and learn about NIL. So we walked up and down, our Main Street, Grand River Avenue. Obviously you're familiar with Michigan State, but I went, another 5 miles up the road to Okemos, to where there's another sector of businesses, and I handed out flyers. I went downtown Lansing yesterday and handed out flyers. I went over to Frando, which is another little small sector where it's got an outdoor shopping mall, handed out flyers. So I'm literally going into these businesses, talking to the manager, talking to somebody there. Hey, I think you would be interested in this event. Come out and check it out. At this event, again, I'm not going to talk to, Darien Harris Enterprises and say,
Right.
you need to work with this player and pay him this amount. It's going to be more, again, educational, but to entice them and incentivize them to maybe get involved. So we'll say, hey, when you're looking at it, here's the benefits of working with student athletes. The engagement rate of student athletes have on their social media pages, the fact that the fan base is going to get behind anything that's supporting student athletes, the opportunity to work with young people, the opportunity to get a new consumer demographic. So essentially it's taking, the marketing background that I have and just educating them on how do you translate that to student athletes, because all of these folks are successful in business. They understand marketing, they understand advertising, they understand endorsements. What they may not have the knowledge on is how NIL works, because you see a lot of different things. You see these crazy astronomical numbers thrown out there that aren't really happening. You think that you can only get the star player and that's going to be the best play. It's like, no, we have entire teams of 15, 20, 30, track and field's got 125 athletes. Imagine if you work with all of them. You don't got to pay all of them $1 million
Right.
at the end of the day, but you're getting the engagement and the impressions and all of that on social media from all of these different student athletes. They're micro influencers. And what I always say is like, when you're talking about some big brands out there, like I'm a big NBA guy. So you see like Kim Kardashian's got Skims on the court now. Okay. I mean, we can disseminate about that all we want, but it's good marketing.
Right.
Great. But a local business here does not need to sign Kim Kardashian to do anything. They need to work with the student athletes, because those are the influencers that move the needle in this city. As we know from playing here, imagine if we were able to partner with some of the businesses that are around here, and imagine the amount of people we would have brought to those businesses. Imagine, and it just starts with family. Like, hey, if I'm sponsored by the local pizza chain, after every game, I can go in and be able to feed my family after a game. Well, they're going to tell all their friends and all their people, hey, when you go to East Lansing, you got to go check out this pizza spot. They take care of us.
Yep.
And that's how you build community. Now, imagine if you did that with 10 athletes or 15 athletes. It doesn't really mess with your bottom line. You get a pizza a week, 15 pizzas a week you give out at the end of the day. Imagine how much that's going to translate if you gave 15 pizzas out a week to 15 different student athlete families that actually have hundreds of people over the 4 or 5 years here coming in to see them.
Right.
So that's the more of the education piece that we give the businesses, and then a light bulb goes off, and then that's when they want to get involved.
Gotcha. So then when they do want to get involved, do they call or reach out directly to that athlete, or
They can.
or do they reach out to you guys, or maybe a combination of both? Whatever.
So they can reach out directly to the athlete. Then we push them to get into our local exchange. Our MSU exchange is where we house all of the businesses that want to get involved in NIL. And then the student athletes have access to the exchange. Obviously, the businesses have access, and then it's a two-way street of communication. They can, of course, go straight to the athlete. They can reach out to us as well. Again, we want to make sure that no athlete misses out on an opportunity because of a lack of communication.
Right.
And so, again, as long as we're not like brokering the deal in terms of the monetary value, then we can make those introductions.
No, and that makes perfect sense, and I appreciate you breaking it down that way. It definitely makes perfect sense. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this, and I'm not sure if you kind of work closely or kind of directly with this at all, but I know it was a number of states that allowed high school athletes to participate in NIL, And Michigan was one of those states at first that didn't allow, but as of from my understanding, last month in October, the legislature allowed or passed a law that essentially allowed high school student athletes to get involved in an NIL deal. Did you hear about this? And if so, I guess what is your thoughts on high school athletes now being able to participate from an NIL perspective?
Yeah, definitely have been keeping up with that, because it's something that we have to monitor and be aware of, especially when recruiting athletes that either may have already participated in NIL activations or just make sure that they're up to date on all the rules and regulations. And, again, I'm always in the camp of I don't want anybody to miss out on opportunities, but I'm really big on the education piece. And, I think sometimes, I'm sure as you know as well, like when you mention education and stuff like that, people think you're trying to dilute the space or trying to take money out of people's pockets. It's actually the opposite. I'm trying to protect them just as you are, in your role. And I'm sure when you have conversations with people that may result in like, hey, I don't think you should necessarily touch this deal here.
Right.
And they're like, well, I'm not going to make the money. It's like, well, that's true, but we're really trying to protect you in the long run. The problem with NIL is that everybody's got a different interpretation of what it is. And so now it has literally become kind of this now where people think you can just show up somewhere and say, I would like some NIL. Yep. It's not how it's supposed to work. And it gets really dangerous when the younger you get, because you're a lot more obviously influenced by the people around you. And so again, it's no knock on anybody that's around these folks, these young kids. But people, again, they don't really have a full grasp of what NIL is. They really think that, as you mentioned, you show up somewhere and somebody's going to pay you $25,000 a year. That's not reality at the end of the day. It's not supposed to be NIL. There are some places that it's happening, but it's not everywhere. And so when you think that that's everywhere, or you think that that's your leverage for something, that's not going to be the case. And for all the high school athletes, like, again, at the end of the day, it really comes down to, as a business, does this make sense for me?
Right.
Does it make sense for me to partner with a 14-year-old kid, a 15-year-old kid, a 16-year-old kid? What's that going to do for my business?
Right.
At the end of the day, And so, yeah, it's exciting news when that stuff comes out, but it's going to be really similar to how it was when NIL first dropped for college athletes. All these athletes tweeting out the same thing, saying my DMs are open for business opportunities, and nobody messages them, because why would you?
Yep.
At the end of the day, as a business owner, why that doesn't make any sense. And so it really is kind of, again, it's education for the athletes, for the parents, for the coaches in high school, and getting them to understand, because what's going to end up happening is, especially at these prep schools and all that stuff. Look, I went to one, I was recruited out of 8th grade to go to high school. So if you can imagine these prep schools, they're going to be doing the same thing that colleges are doing, or we can help you with NIL opportunities if you decide to come here. And so we just got to make sure we're careful about that.
And this brings up two questions that I want to ask you. I was interviewing Greg Jones actually a couple of days ago, and he was essentially kind of telling the athletes like, hey, man, you're always being watched.
Yep.
And he was saying how some of the things that the student athletes should be doing to strengthen or increase their chances of NIL, such as making sure you're, kind of treating, going about things the right way on social media, going to class, getting good grades, just presenting yourself the right way. What additional things that you just see and advice that you can give to maybe those who are maybe looking to try to get some type of NIL deal, that they should make sure they're going about things the right way, whether it's, again, going to class or getting good grades. Obviously, those are more obvious things, but what are some things that you think will help out that student athlete, whether you're at the high school level or the collegiate level, strengthen their chances of landing an NIL deal?
Definitely, yeah. We talk about brand development here a lot. We have a program called Define You, which is really just all encompassing about who you are, maximizing that, and again, understanding what you have to go through to get an opportunity to land some NIL deals. And so we always start with your brand, your story, and really trying to teach these student athletes, how do you tell your story in a way that's going to galvanize an audience and make people interested in what you have going on, because everybody's got a unique story. And so whether that's, of course, on social media, through content creation, in the media, so through media training and things of that nature, as you mentioned, and as Greg talked about, making sure your digital footprint is in order, so keep your social media clean, because we have seen some athletes, lose out on opportunities because They're on TikTok rapping a song with some explicit lyrics. Now it's like, end of the day, do we all do that driving around on our own? Absolutely, but you can't put that out there because then a brand is not going to want to work with you. So that's just learning experience. And then the second part of that is in the define you pillars is we talk about playmaking. You gotta go be a baller. Like at the end of the day, people try to skip past that. Now if you are already coming in as one of these influencers and that's the path you want to take, and I have no problem with that because there's obviously a lucrative business out there for being a social media influencer. And if you want to just utilize your opportunities and resources as a student athlete to also build your brand on social media, you already have a big following, you're doing a lot of stuff on whether it's TikTok or Instagram or whatever, that's totally okay. But for the vast majority, again, as you mentioned, it's the big time, the prime time players that are getting the opportunities. Everybody's got an opportunity to be that, but you got to go out there and actually do it. So what are you doing to put the work in to go out there and be a baller, be a playmaker? Because the playmakers get paid. Obviously, there's a reason that the highest paid players in the leagues are the highest paid players because they go out there and they get it done. And so you don't want to skip past that, but that's what people want to do. You want to show up day one out of high school looking for NIL deals. You haven't done anything. We don't even know if you're good or not. So it's like that's just the reality that you always got to talk about. Then we talk about social media engagement, community engagement, really leaning into the community and making sure you have presence there, and then content creation and how you're going about that. So those are kind of the things that we touch on, hit on to be able to kind of maximize your NIL opportunities. But it's also a process, and you have to put the work in just like anything else.
No, and I definitely agree with everything you just said there. Do you think the media has, I guess, been a reason? Because again, I was maybe at a high school local football game here recently, and hear some adults talking next to me and talking about maybe a high school athlete who maybe has these offers to Alabama or this school or that school, and they're talking about, well, yeah, I told them what the NIL money looking like, and so it seems like the media maybe puts these numbers out there, such as LeBron James' son and maybe Shador Sanders and their NIL valuation and is in the millions, which it seems like that's like a very slim or minority of athletes who kind of even touch those numbers. But then you kind of put this in an athlete head where, hey, I need $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year. Heck, I was just looking at the Ohio State athletic director, and I guess in a recent interview, he was saying that recruits not want money to actually come visit the school.
Yes, they do.
Which is that's crazy to even think that you have that type of entitlement at that point. But it seems like what you're saying, hey, a lot of these deals are not even monetary in that way. It may be, hey, promote our brand and get some pizza or get wear our clothing and things like that. So I guess how many or what percentage of these deals out there kind of consist of money? Because it seems like everybody thinks that all these deals are money driven, which it seems like they're not. So what percentage have you had to guess of these NIL deals that are happening at the high school or collegiate level actually exchanging money as opposed to, we're going to give you a product or we're going to, give you something that is not monetarily?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably 50-50, somewhere around there. I think it fluctuates, but yeah, I mean, it also depends on which student athlete you're talking to. And at the end of the day, that's just reality also. I just left, I was handing out, we do an NIL celebration every year where we actually hand out awards here for NIL to student athletes. And it has nothing to do with how much anybody's made. It's more of like, have you monetized your brand the best way? We base it off the pillars. Have you used NIL to empower others? How have you been innovative in the NIL space? We have an NIL Ambassador of the Year award, and we have an NIL Team of the Year award. And it has nothing to do with how much anybody's made. It has to do with how have you activated that's unique and different. Most of these awards go to, what we like to say is the non-revenue sports, the Olympic sports, the sports that aren't football and men's basketball, because those are the sports, as you mentioned, at a football game. And it's not everybody, because essentially NIL has definitely spread to every sport, to where it doesn't matter what sport it is, recruits are talking about it. But we know the main ones that are saying, hey, as you mentioned, let's see what NIL dollars are talking about, and that'll determine where we go. It's not a good approach because, again, we know there's a whole lot more to going to school than just NIL. But that's what people are talking about now. Then you look at some of the other student athletes who have gotten product deals, who have been able to network and just create different avenues for them in the future, they're grateful for these opportunities. They're grateful to local, again, a local chain saying, hey, come in once a week for a free whatever.
Yep.
It makes an impact, so and again, it's like there's no right or wrong way to do it. I want athletes to make as much money as they can, but you got to go about it the right way. And it does get dangerous when you're starting to make recruiting decisions based on NIL. A lot of the coaches will now say, like, we don't want those types of kids. And then because it's just transactional for you. And we're trying, that's already where it's leaning towards. But again, I picked Michigan State because of the people. Now, we didn't have NIL. And so I'm not going to sit there and be naive and try to say that I don't know how I would have moved if NIL was a thing, but I do know why I chose to leave home and come to Michigan State, and it was the best decision I could have made because of the people, and it continues to be that because of the people, even though I'm employed here. It's the people, and so you're starting to see that through the eyes of recruits and families and stuff like that. It's becoming less and less about the people and more about the transaction.
No, yeah, for sure. And again, I'm not sure, man, I don't want to use the word scary. That's kind of getting scary, but someone who's played football for Michigan State, earned my mechanical engineering degree from Michigan State, got my earned my law degree from Michigan State, just being out in the real world, how much just being a part of that Spartan community, the alumni, how that has paid dividends for me. Whereas, now, like you said, it has become so transactional where, you may, if you're not happy at this school or that school, it's easy to pick up and leave and go to another school. And it's like, okay, so where's your home base after this all said and done? How are you going to, because again, I think, being a part of a community is going to help you out in life at some point, whether it's, finding job opportunities, meeting friends or, becoming friends with people who are Michigan State alumni, whatever the case may be. And it'll be interesting to see how things play out with this new generation. It seems like it's kind of more of a transactional thing. Now I have to ask you this. So I was talking to Greg Jones, and obviously we know Greg Jones, man. He was a dog. Went on All-American, I think, freshman All-American. Went on to win a Super Bowl with the Giants. And I was asking him, what do he think his NIL would have been over that time period in terms of what do he think he would have earned? He said somewhere along of maybe like high six figures, maybe kind of the seven figures over the whole duration of his time at MSU. And maybe even high school, if he was able to kind of get some in high school. Do you ever think about that in terms of, okay, what your number would have been from an NIL that you could have earned over this time period? Because again, you're a starter and again part of the class where you guys won a Rose Bowl and went to the playoffs and I think a Cotton Bowl as well. So do you ever think of, okay, what do I think I would have earned during this time period at Michigan State if NIL was available back when I played?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of it in that lens for sure, but also in a different lens of, you gotta, you gotta go back and put your 18 to 22-year-old brain, in your body and think about what you're thinking about then, not what you're thinking about at this age.
Right.
But I think about, hey, would I have, tried out entrepreneurship? Would I have sought out opportunities to invest? Would I have done those things, which is what we're also trying to actively educate student athletes on, because it's a no risk situation now because you're still in college. So you can go out and start your own business. If it doesn't work, so what? There's resources around and there's people around that can support that to kind of bring it to fruition, and you can really experiment with it. So that's what I would have hoped that I would have done is, absolutely, made some dollars from endorsement opportunities or different things like that, especially because we were winning, if there was a collective, it would have probably paid pretty well because of the success we were having, which again, is not supposed to be the case, but you're kind of naive to feel like it doesn't, have anything to do with performance at the end of the day. And then I also would have hoped that I would have, looked at the business sector. And then also the nonprofit sector, hopefully I would have started a foundation or a kids camp or youth clinic or gone back home and done something. Those are the things that it's always awesome to see student athletes doing that.
Oh, and that's, I guess, where I was kind of going with that question as well is, because, man, now, just think if whatever reason you were able to make, say, seven figures or even say a couple $100,000 over 4 or 5 years at a university. And now, like you said, there's no risk at that point. And as opposed to going out and buying a Range Rover, going out
Right.
and buying this cars, which you don't need anyway on campus. You can kind of get around on a bus or with a regular vehicle, being able to invest that money. My big investment vehicle is real estate, where I have a number of rental properties and things like that. And I always think to myself, man, if I would have knew what I know now, or even back when I first started to learn this stuff in college, I mean, I still wanted to play football, but man, I probably would have had 1,000 units at this point.
Right.
But
Right.
being able to kind of invest that money in whatever investment vehicle, and now you're coming out at 22, 23 years old, and you have this kind of stream of passive income. That life is, I don't want to say becomes easier at that point, but you have done things in the right way to the point where now you're able to kind of benefit some of the fruits of the labor if you do invest those things correctly, and not kind of spend them on things that you're not going to care about once you're done college or done playing ball.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, again, going back to the education piece. That's why it's important to get folks, even folks like yourself, in front of these athletes early and say, hey, we know you're making a couple dollars now. We're not going to tell you exactly what to do with your money, but I can tell you that, like you said, going out and buying the latest car, probably not the best idea.
Right.
You got to learn the word no to people, because there's people now dipping in your pockets, and you got to tell them, like, hey, I'm going to set us up for a better future, but I need to do it this way. I need to make sure I'm investing now for the future. And so the earlier, like you said, that they learn that and pick up on that, the better. But that's always the most challenging part, because you start to look at some of these opportunities, and it's like, when is somebody, I always say on a recruiting visit, I always ask, I say, oh, what's your favorite fast food restaurant, or what's your favorite chain, or whatever like that. And they, whatever, Waffle House, for example, like I miss Waffle House. And I said, so if let's just say hypothetically, I was your agent and I was allowed to do this. If I got you an NIL deal with Waffle House, would you be happy, excited? Oh, yeah, absolutely, it'd be great. And I was like, okay, that's cool, but what if you own the Waffle House?
Yep.
End of the day. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, what if you own the franchise? Nothing says you can't do that.
Yep.
At the end of the day, there's no rule against owning a franchise. And guess what? If you said you wanted to do that, I guarantee you could find somebody to invest with you, for you, instead of just throwing you cash and all this other stuff. How about you find somebody to pick up the down payment on a place, and then now you're a franchise owner, and then now you're working through this sector, and now you're a student athlete franchise owner in your own college town.
Yep.
Imagine what that looks like. Okay. But do you think anybody's done that yet? No. You know what I mean?
So do you think, because that's interesting, and that brings up a good point, do you think maybe, number one, that those type of negotiations could be made when you're talking to a business, especially that has, franchises, to say, hey, I want the ability, even if it's not now, but I want the ability to be able to own a franchise of this particular, restaurant or whatever chain at some point later on, if I do this for the next 4 or 5 years. Is that something that
Absolutely. And so again, we just need to continue to push that on our end. And it's like, hey, look, like, you don't, I'm not saying come in as a freshman and purchase a franchise, but it's something you can think about. And it's something that if you are somebody that is getting, a pretty substantial amount of money, or any amount of money. I mean, like you said, if you're getting $1,000 a month, that's 48,000 over 4 years. That's 48 grand. You take the taxes out of it. That's 20-something grand. That's a franchise fee.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? If you're getting, that's the low end, sometimes if you're getting more than that, if you're getting to 5 to 6, 7, 8, 10 grand a month, now, yeah, you are looking at leaving out of here that you literally could leave out of here with $250,000 of untouched money.
No, yeah. And
because you don't lose your scholarship. You're not losing your stipend. At the end of the day, like, hey, both of us were okay here. Now you may go get the freshman's car to go to the CAF or whatever, but I mean, we made it through just fine, at the end of the day. And I came in, my senior year was when the cost of attendance got introduced. And oh, by the way, now imagine this just started this summer, Alston funds. You get a $7,000 check if you are in good academic standing, which is like passing. So if you think about your stipend, your cost of attendance, some of these guys are on Pell, FAFSA, Alston funds. You don't have to touch any NIL money, because it's no different than it was prior to 2021. We got guys on the team now that have been here since 2019, and sometimes they're talking a little bit about like, hey, I kind of need this. I'm like, well, how did you survive for the first 2 years of college here?
Right.
You were just fine. all the stuff you're getting now is extra. And if you applied it in the right way, whether it's into a franchise, whether it's just investing in a space, whether it's just finding a good savings vehicle, starting a retirement fund early. And we provide all this education. We have MSU, FCU come in. We have all these experts come in, and we will continue to do that. But it's very difficult. And again, I get it because we've been that age. It's difficult for them to apply it. And it's literally like there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that these athletes could be saving for their time after playing, that they could just have to just, you could be working a regular corporate job and have a couple of franchises. Like you mentioned, you could have a couple of rental properties. You could, and literally imagine that you just have to go to college to be able to do that.
For sure. Yep. And do you think, and obviously the answer is obvious to this one, but how much of the family aspect of it is important when you're doing that or when you're thinking about these things? Because it seems like on one hand, you can have the family that's kind of pulling all your resources and now you feel obligated. Okay, you're getting some additional money to send this money back to them during your time period. Now, once you're done playing, you look up and you maybe earn a couple $100,000, but kind of spent it all maybe on dumb things or giving it away to friends and family. Whereas maybe a family kind of structure or circle who's telling you, invest these things and they're not trying to just kind of take the money for them to spend on kind of useless things. How important, I guess, is that aspect of, well, we know it's important, but how much do you see that where like the families are like leeches as opposed to being like, okay, we're going to spend this money wisely, this additional money wisely?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like any other athlete sector where you just want to make sure that you're educating the families also, and you just hope that they're just doing right by the student athlete at the end of the day, and so it's no different than the stories we hear from the pros or anything like that where it's not common. Like, I think that, again, we make it seem like it's like a commonality that, every family is just leeching on to the kid. That's not the case,
right.
And you just hope that for the cases where that may be happening, that there is enough education to where that they understand, like, hey, this really is an opportunity for the future for this kid. Let's make sure that we don't mess that up.
No, I got you. No, and that makes perfect sense. So as an IP attorney, I'm thinking of, and you mentioned it earlier, okay, branding. This is, and regardless of who you are, whether you are kind of working in corporate America, whether you're an athlete, whether you are, just regardless, you are a brand and kind of how you carry yourself, whether it's what you post, kind of how you act in public, just how you are on the job. You are a brand and, you're kind of, whatever you're putting out there is part of your brand. So I guess with regard to these athletes, when they are coming up and they're getting these NIL deals and they're considered brands, I'm big on, again, as part of an IP attorney, protecting your brand. So if you have a trademark, to get that protected, if you have any intellectual property that you're putting out there, whether it's a copyright or a trademark or whatever, kind of protect that through the proper channels, whether, again, it's filing a trademark application or filing for copyright registration or whatever the case may be. How important is that on your end? I'm assuming that that's a part of the education process when you're talking to these athletes, when it's like, okay, no, protect your brand, protect your IP. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, really important. And we have a great education partner in Team Advance. And then that piece for what you're talking about specifically is really headed up by Luke Vedlum, who's a non-practicing sports attorney. So they go through their DDMC model, which is decision-making due diligence, money and contracts, and just making sure that, again, like you said, the athletes are protected, especially when it comes to their IP, especially when it comes to trademarks, and if they end up having their own logo or clothing line or anything that's within that entrepreneurship space, making sure that they have the education to go out there and protect themselves. So not, are we able to provide, those resources specifically? Not necessarily, but we can educate on how do you go about getting that or steer them in the right direction if need be.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. So then I want to turn a little bit maybe to you personally, again, coming up out of Maryland, and you said earlier that, you chose MSU as because of the people, just kind of, again, just doing in preparation for this interview. Again, father played at Virginia Tech back in the 80s. So you came from a football family. what was like the deciding factor? I know you said the people that made you say, hey, I'm gonna choose Michigan State as opposed to maybe one of these other colleges that were recruiting you at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted a great education and wanted to play big time ball, and so we felt like Michigan State was the best opportunity to merge both of those together. You know, we know what the Big Ten in general stands for is that we are the conference that's able to merge both. You know, you can get a tremendous education and have an opportunity to compete for championships, and so I definitely want to do that. But also wanted to have you know, a meaningful impact in the academia space, and you know, again, based on what I wanted to do, based on the fact that, you know, we don't force anybody into majors. We let the student athletes choose their own path. That was really important to me as well, my family as well. And yeah, couldn't have made a better decision.
Okay, no, yeah, then that's perfect. So then, I mean, obviously, it worked out for you. You know, 4-year letter winner, 2-year starter. Again, just some amazing games with kind of the playoff and the Cotton Bowl and Rose Bowl. So then you go on and kind of, you know, give it a shot with the NFL, and then, you know, sometime in the CFL. At what point I was talking to Benny Fowler and in an interview, maybe this was several months ago, and he was saying, hey, I knew it was time to do something different because no other doors were open, and he had to stint with the Broncos and the Patriots and some other teams. But when the doors, I guess, the opportunity stopped presenting themselves, then he knew it was time to move on. Was that a similar thing for you, or was it, hey, even though you still had the opportunity to play, I mean, I just, this other thing that I want to, there's something else that I want to do, that I want to kind of start that kind of career after football. How did you kind of come to that decision as you were, you know, playing professionally?
Yeah, I felt like there was, you know, there was definitely something else that I was supposed to do. You know, my last 2 years of playing ball, I had the same injury, on the same leg, on the same day of practice, doing the same drill. And so that's what really told me, like, okay, if you keep trying to push this opportunity here, the same thing's going to be happening to you. So that's just God talking. That's just divine intervention and saying, like, hey man, like, you did everything you needed to do with this game. Now it's time to go on and pour it into somebody else. And so I really took that to heart. And as we know, that transition from athletics and from the sport is incredibly challenging, no matter what.
Sure.
Whether, you know, you play a few years like I did, or you play, you know, almost a decade like Benny did and like Greg did, and they both won Super Bowls and all that stuff. It's still challenging, no matter what. You know, my last year playing in Ottawa, I was teammates with Greg, you know, and that's somebody that, you know, I looked up to and revered. And it's actually the other reason that I came to Michigan State, because I watched him carry the Big Ten championship trophy to center court of the Breslin, and I said, I want to do that. And then I got to do it 5 years later.
Nice.
So like, I knew in my head, I actually had a number. I said at age 25, if I'm not on an active NFL roster, then I'm done. And was working my way to that during age 25, and had the same injury happen again. And so I was like, all right, that's it. You know, you gotta put a stop to it. You gotta have something in your head that's like, all right, I know it's gonna be tough, but we gotta transition. And the way that made the transition easier is I could just lean back on Michigan State. And so that's what I did. I relied on Michigan State. I came back here, got a GA ship, got my master's, got my first job at Big B Coffee in Lake Lansing.
Big.
And like, that was my way of transitioning out of the sport, you know. And there's the people here, again, they made it as seamless and as easy as possible.
No, and again, I think you bring up a good point that I don't want to continue to hammer on this, or, you know, badger this point, but again, just when you're kind of thinking about things as being more so transactional and kind of jumping from school to school, it seems like, as you said, your transition from football playing kind of, I guess, the working world, so to speak, was easier because you are a part of a community, as opposed to, hey, having played at 3-4 different schools and maybe not really had a good home base to kind of rely on and kind of go back to. I know Denzel Jones, who was my teammate, he was another guy who from the Florida area and kind of, you know, able to do a lot of cool things within that MSU community after his playing days were over with as well. And so it seems like, okay, you're done playing, and you have a journalism background and marketing background, and it seems like maybe 3 areas that you see the athletes kind of transition into is either effectively the front office, which you are talking about, you know, your directors maybe on a path to AD, athletic director, or you have broadcasting, which again, you did some with the Big Ten Network and things like that, or you get into coaching. What I guess how did you kind of calculate things or make sense of it and say, okay, I'm gonna do maybe this over that? Because again, it seems like you kind of did a little bit with all three of them. So how did you kind of make that determination to say, hey, I'm essentially going to the front office and try to kind of do that maybe long term?
Yeah, I mean, I got some advice along the way with some folks who kind of said, based on what we've seen from your skill set, we think you're just better suited for, like you said, the front office business route. Again, not that we don't think you can be a dynamic coach, but just the path of being a coach is a really long path.
Tough.
And like you can really make an impact earlier going this route that not a lot of people have the opportunity to do. Coach D'Antonio was one of those people who flat out was like, hey man, don't go into coaching, go this way, and I'm like, if you're telling me that, I'm gonna listen at the end of the day. And so, again, best advice I could have taken. And I'm always been somebody that likes to do a lot of different things. So, the reason I got a journalism degree is because I didn't want to be the former player that got in the media just because they were a former player. I wanted to have the background in the space. Really enjoyed it. Same thing. It's kind of a long road to get to, if you're hosting First Take or something like that. Not that we're adverse to long roads,
Right.
but where the media space was going became a little more performative. Just kind of, I wanted to steer a little bit away from that. And so, I just have always gravitated towards the business world, sports business, and marketing. That's why I got my master's in marketing and research, because I've seen a lot of successful administrative folks transition from that marketing realm, because that's what the world revolves around now. And like that's where my passion is. So when it comes to like some of those, like I love the competition, of course, and I love every sport, but like I like to look at, okay, what does what's the structure of F1, for example? I make so much money. Okay, what is the structure of the US Open? What is the business structure of the NBA now? Obviously the NFL. Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy are about to start a new indoor golf league. Okay, what's the structure of it? What does the TV contracts look like? Oh, you're putting it on Monday night. That makes sense because Americans are already trained to watch sports on Monday night because of the NFL. Perfect. So like things like that is what I'm always interested in, and love learning about and love to apply. And fortunately in the collegiate space now, there are opportunities to do that, whether it's NIL, corporate partnerships, which another former player here, Otis Wiley, is over that for our athletic department. So just working like that angle is what, is exciting to me. And then also, of course, get to have a piece of the sport aspect and winning and recruiting and all of those things that just generate that excitement of actually going out there and getting a victory as well.
Oh, absolutely. So and again, I think that was a great segue into, I guess, the next point or the next question in terms of like the long-term goals. I know Ashton Henderson, who I played with, I also played with Otis Wiley, and I was interviewing Ashton several months ago, and he have done some great things, kind of started at MSU and kind of went to Clemson and Florida State and then came back, and I think he's an associate athletic director there, and he has this plan. He just absolutely knows, and I believe him 100% that, hey, one day he's like, man, this is just me in terms of being an athletic director for a program, which I know he will do great things once he's caught on to do that. But as far as you, what do you think the future holds, and maybe some goals? Is it the goal to be an AD for a program, or kind of do you see yourself in another role, or kind of this thing playing out differently? What are, as you kind of write down your goals and think about your goals long term, do you see yourself doing maybe 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, my ultimate goal is to be president and CEO of a professional sports team. And
Nice.
so whether that's, of course, the NFL seems like the obvious, but I'm a huge NBA guy, and I love every sport, and I've had conversations with folks that have been presidents in the MLB, NHL, NBA, and NFL. Doesn't really matter to me. It's not, as a starting point, but whatever route and avenues I got to take to get to that point is my ultimate career goal. Obviously, athletic director may be one of those obviously monumental steps along the way, and hey, maybe an athletic director opportunity ends up being what it is in the long run. But I know in my heart of hearts, I want to end up at the pro level, and end up in that role.
No, nice. No, and man, that's nice. So then I guess maybe the last thing I'll do to kind of get you out on, is maybe, can you talk a little bit about what Alan Haller has meant to you from a personal standpoint? I know, again, just to see his rise and progression, for me, kind of looking from afar, I know back when I was playing, he was part of the police force that, again, we're going to bowl games and things like that. They were, I saw him often around, and again, obviously he was a spar dog, played for Michigan State, and to kind of see his kind of progression and now running a program, and he's done some great things, but he kind of took over a program. Well, Mark Hollis, from an athletic director standpoint, he did a lot of great things, but at the time he took over, it was some challenges within the program, and he's still fighting through challenges at different points based on some things that's coming up. But kind of personally, as an African American man, seeing him in that position, and then also it seems like he has given you opportunities to kind of showcase your talent and make change within a program. Also, just like to get your thoughts on what he has meant to you from a personal standpoint.
Oh yeah, I mean, Alan's the reason I'm here, in the position that I'm in now. He was the one that hired me originally to come back here in 2020. He's somebody that I've obviously had a very close relationship with since playing here and beyond. Somebody that I would periodically meet up with for lunch and things of that nature, just to check in between that time frame of my final game here in East Lansing and now coming back on staff. He's the one that asked me to transition over out of football and in the athletic department, as an assistant AD and as his special advisor, which is just a tremendous opportunity from a career standpoint for me, to have that, as a title, and to be able to have, his ear on some things and be able to learn from him. And as you mentioned, as him being an African-American, being a Black man in this role, it's tremendous. It's us helping each other, which is always going to be important. But he doesn't, he's not just handing out opportunities. You got to earn it. And
Absolutely.
so I'm thankful that he pushes all of us to be better and to go and earn the opportunity when it's there. And then when you've earned it, then you go ahead and get it. So we have a tremendous relationship. It's been amazing to watch his career path, as you mentioned, and I'm looking forward to continuing to follow in his footsteps.
No, nice. No, that's big. Like I said, I'm definitely proud of him, and it seems like he's done some amazing things. I definitely know you're going to follow suit from him. So I guess in terms of some last words, you maybe kind of share with the audience, particularly as it relates to NIL and the student athletes coming up, maybe just kind of some words of wisdom as we close out here, related to NIL and some things to maybe consider or think about as student athletes as they're coming up and navigating this crazy time of NIL space.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say that, the first thing is that NIL is not a requirement to have a fantastic collegiate experience. It's a great additive, but it's not something that you have to participate in if you don't want to. And so that's always something that I lead with. Even going out and, I was at a breakfast this morning with 300 student athletes, and we're passing out flyers for our celebration. And it's like, hey, come check it out. You don't have to have a deal to come check out an event like this. Just come hang out, have a good time. But if you are interested in NIL, you do have to do a little legwork on your end. Your brand is not just going to be built overnight. You have to do some consistent work, just like you do with anything else. And nowadays, being a student athlete, there's a lot that goes into that pie. It used to just be go to school, play a sport. And then they started talking about, social life being a little important. Then they started talking about spiritual life and emotional health and mental health, of course, nowadays is very prevalent, as it should have been for a long time. And now we're also talking about building a personal brand. So you got 5, 6, 7, 8 things that you're supposed to put 100% effort into. It's a lot. So if it ever becomes too much, you don't have to do it. But at the same time, if you are interested, you have to put a little work in. And if you do put in the work in, then there's always going to be great results, just like anything.
No, and I appreciate that. I appreciate those words. And I 100% agree with you. Yeah, at least back when I was there, it was, hey, man, just kind of go to school and get some good grades and kind of play football or your sport or whatever, and maybe enjoy yourself in the meantime. But now with, like you said, all the stuff that's going on between the mental health and emotional, spiritual health, and just kind of having this kind of push the social media brand, it's a lot that's kind of thrown on these student athletes, which I couldn't imagine trying to kind of navigate those waters at this point. But again, definitely agree with everything you just said with that. And again, I want to personally thank you for kind of sharing some just some expertise with our audience, particularly as it relates to NIL. I think you I've learned things that I didn't know just from hearing you talking, kind of shares the knowledge that you have gained and earned over the past few years within the space. And I know without a shadow of doubt that the audience will also pick up some things as well as they kind of listen to to the uh, the interview. So is it a way to kind of follow you on social media, reach out if maybe athletes want just more information as relates to NIL or just want to connect with you?
Definitely, absolutely. So on X, Twitter, and Instagram, it's just dharris_45. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Just my name, Darien Harris, on there. And then we also have just launched our X platform for NIL, which is MSU_NIL for our Evergreen program. So very, very, very easy to get in contact with. And yeah, would love to connect if anybody's got any questions or anything.
Definitely, definitely. And I'll leave the audience with that. We're checking out, and until next time.